Whenever I tell people the story of how I learned programming in Lagos, Nigeria, it seems like a fiction story, but it really happened. This is the first time I'm ever sharing this story on social media, and I'm ready to be vulnerable. This is how I learned programming in Lagos, Nigeria. For those who are new here, I'm Nigerian, born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria, the mainland. Surulere to be very specific. To understand this story, you guys need some context. I did 6 years of elementary and 6 years of high school in Nigeria. I graduated high school in July 2019, and this is where the whole journey started. In Nigeria, when you graduate high school, you must take an exam called JAMB, which is similar to the SAT in America. You need to take that exam before you can enter college. I sat for my JAMB exam and I failed. Yes, I failed. I didn't meet the passing score, which meant I couldn't enroll in college, and I had to wait an extra year to retake the exam. My parents weren't buying that idea. My parents' exact words were, instead of me to sit at home for a year, I should go and learn work. Learn work in Nigerian lingua basically means going to trade school, learning to fix cars, wire houses, plumbing. I mean, you get the point. At least I'm grateful I wasn't forced to learn one specific trade. I had the option to choose what trade I wanted to learn. I thought about it and said if I had passed my JAMB exam, I would have still gone to school to study computer science because that's what I had in mind at that time. So why don't I just go to a computer trade school? That way it prepares me for when I get into college. My parents agreed and I went to make inquiries at arguably the best computer trade school in Nigeria at that time, NIIT. They listed out their curriculum for me and asked me to pick what I was interested in. I had 4 options: web development, mobile app development, DevOps, and networking. I did a little bit of research and I chose web development because that's what seemed the most interesting to me at that time. We paid and I enrolled into the web development program in October 2019 and I started classes almost immediately. I attended classes regularly, but honestly, I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't really understanding anything. The curriculum was so fast-paced that you can't afford to miss a single day of class. Every other person in my class already had an idea of HTML and CSS, so it was very easy for them to, flow with the class. But for me, honestly, it was like I was learning a new spoken language. Let's fast track to December 2019. It was the end of the first semester at trade school and I barely made it through. Like, I was still as confused as I was when I enrolled. In January 2020, we were supposed to resume back, but COVID hit Nigeria and everywhere was on lockdown. So the trade school had to close and they moved all classes to online classes. And I was barely able to learn anything in person. I didn't see how I could learn anything online. So I dropped out of the trade school. There was no point wasting all that cash without getting any value from it. Now, at this point, having experienced all this, if it were someone else, they would have called it a day. Like, they're never doing anything programming related anymore. Like, they will probably find something else to do. But see, I was the exact opposite. I was still interested because the whole idea of building anything you want software-wise with just lines of code really fascinated me. So I decided I was still going to continue pursuing this career, but now going through the self-taught route. Now, listen, you wouldn't understand this if you're not Nigerian. But being a self-taught developer, living in Nigeria has to be one of the most difficult challenges you will ever face in your career. You think finding a tech job is hard? Try being a self-taught developer living in Nigeria. It feels like all odds are against you. But still, the best developers from Africa are Nigerians. It's surprising, but that's a discussion for another day. Being a self-taught developer in Nigeria, there are just so many barriers. Biggest of all being lack of constant electricity and expensive internet access, in my opinion. When trying to be a self-taught developer, there are 2 things that are very important. You being able to access the internet to get learning resources, and you being able to have access to a computer at any time without you worrying about battery life. If you're living in a more advanced country, hearing those 2 things might sound very basic, right? But still, they're very important. But the whole point is that those 2 things right there were my challenges. I was a fresh high school grad with no job. I basically couldn't afford internet access. I usually deploy my apps and Google all my questions during the middle hours of the night. Not because I enjoyed it or I liked it, but because that is when we had power and that's when internet subscription was cheap. The little I could afford, I couldn't use it to download gigabytes worth of courses online. So what I did was I used the W3 Schools app. This app right here is the GOAT. What I did was I would take screenshots of all the tutorials from this app, save them on my phone, and practice them later. I was doing that for some time until I came across a guy at my church that was also a computer science major in college. His college was also closed, so he said he was learning how to code by himself at home. I asked him how he was able to do that, and he mentioned that he had a full stack web development course he had downloaded onto his hard drive earlier, and that's what he's been watching. At this point, I thought I met my helper. I was really excited to meet him. It's like you finally met someone that you're in the same struggle together. I explained my own predicament to him, that I was enrolled in a web development program at NIIT, but I wasn't really getting anything from it. He was very sympathetic and asked what I'm doing right now. And I told him I was also learning on my own, reading up W3 schools, and that I was also looking for tutorial videos I could watch. So I went ahead and asked him if I could copy those tutorials he mentioned earlier onto my own computer so I can go home and watch them. And guys, this dude literally looked me dead in the eye, like eyeball to eyeball, and told me no. Like, bro, I was shocked. I was flabbergasted. Like, he literally said no without any specific reason. But jokes aside, I felt he actually saw me as a competition, because when we spoke earlier, we were talking about how linking of CSS files worked. And based off on that discussion, he knew I was more knowledgeable than him because of the pointers I was giving him. He figured out that I knew more about HTML and CSS than he did, and he basically saw me as a competitor. And that was my guess why he didn't want me to have the tutorials he was watching. I kept seeing him around on random days, and I kept asking him, but he was still telling me the same thing. Honestly, at this point, I was stuck. Like, I couldn't do anything. There's only so much you can learn from W3 schools, and I really didn't know what to do. But fortunately for me, and unfortunately for him, on a random Sunday, he came up to the tech booth of the church where I was volunteering. He had his laptop out and everything. I was sitting there staring at this guy's bag, knowing his hard drive was in that bag, and saying to myself, like, this might be my only shot of getting this thing. Luckily for me, he stood up and he left the booth. I knew I had no other chance of pursuing this career. Like, I wanted it and it was right there in front of me, and I had to take it. I literally ran to his bag, grabbed the hard drive, went to the back of the booth, searched through the hard drive, found the courses he was talking about. I copied all the course content onto a random PC at the back of the booth. When I came back, he was already there, but I was able to slide the hard drive back into his bag like nothing ever happened. Technically, I didn't steal the hard drive, I just borrowed it without him knowing, right? Later that day, when everybody had left, I went home, grabbed my PC, went back to church, went up to the booth, and copied all the courses from that PC onto my own external hard drive. Guys, believe me when I tell you this dude was literally carrying a whole bootcamp worth of classes on his hard drive. Like, it was crazy. The web development course was what I was really interested in. It was a full stack web development course. It had a HTML and CSS crash course, JavaScript crash course, and a PHP and MySQL crash course. Now, for those of you asking why I write PHP, that's exactly why. That was the only backend course on that hard drive. I mean, it's not like I had an option, like, it wasn't my fault. PHP is still a great programming language, by the way. I have no regrets learning PHP. But I started watching the HTML and CSS crash course. It was by Brad Traversy of Traversy Media. Absolutely amazing guy. After completing the HTML and CSS section, I built my first ever website, you all. I don't know if I have a picture of it, but if I do, I'll put it up on the screen somewhere. It's actually still on my GitHub if you're interested in checking it out. This website was one of the projects in the course, and boy, I was so happy when I finally completed this project. This was my sign that I can actually do this thing, and it's not as complicated as I thought. All I really needed was just the materials to study. I went on to learn JavaScript, and boy, JavaScript kicked my ass. I was literally up all night binge watching tutorials over and over again, trying to make sense of it, but still no progress. It got to a point where I was writing code that I knew worked, but didn't really understand how it worked. I just kept doing it over and over again for months until it clicked. I did a couple of JavaScript projects, but I wasn't really a fan of it, honestly. I didn't spend too much time on JavaScript before I went to learn PHP and MySQL, which I absolutely loved. Learning PHP was what made me feel like an actual programmer. Being able to write server-side code, build APIs, like guys, it was truly amazing. I went on to learn React and it was an absolute disaster. I had to go back and rewatch the JavaScript fundamentals before I finally started making sense of React. After I got comfortable with React, I started getting little side gigs that started paying me, and I was finally able to afford internet access. I started building my home setup slowly. I bought my first monitor. Everything started working out and it was absolutely amazing. I kept on improving my skills in React and PHP throughout 2020 until I finally moved to the US in 2021, which opened a whole new chapter of my life, which is another story for another day. I know most people had bad experiences during the lockdown in 2020, but I put it to you that 2020 was one of my best years. That is when my life took a whole turn for good, and I will never forget it. And also, I just want to, mention this. My intention of making this video is not to motivate you to go steal a hard drive or a PC to pursue your dreams. This is me just telling you my story about what I had to do. But was it right? No. Will I do it again? Absolutely not. I have everything I could ever need to advance my learning as a software developer. But the actions I had to take just tells you the zeal and the passion I had for this career. I could go all out to just make sure I achieve my dreams. And honestly, that's why it pains me sometimes whenever I see people here in more advanced countries not putting in efforts to learn this coding thing. Sometimes I just feel like sitting them down to tell them how hard it is to learn this skill in Nigeria. Here you literally have everything you will ever need to master this skill. You have constant electricity, you have uncapped internet access, high schools here give out laptops for free, and for those that their parents are paying for their colleges, like you have all the free time in the world you could ever need. Like what else do you actually need except from the zeal and the passion for coding? My advice to you all is anyone can do this. Even my Nigerian brothers, I know a lot of things might not be in your favor. I mean, despite all of this, most of the best developers out of Africa are Nigerians. All you need to do is just be determined. There are tons of materials and resources now available. You now even have the likes of AI like ChatGPT and the rest. Just put in the time, and once you're dedicated and consistent, no one can stop you. But yeah guys, that's my story on how I learned to code in Lagos, Nigeria. A very crazy story I wouldn't want to relive, but it's what made me who I am. I'm also curious to know your own story on how you learned how to code. Please drop them in the comment section. I quickly want to say thank you guys for 1,000 subscribers. Like, this is a very massive and important milestone for the growth of this channel. Our next stop is 10,000 subscribers, and I believe we can definitely do it. All you need to do is do your part by hitting that subscribe button. If you found this inspiring, please don't forget to smash that like button. Also leave a comment. Don't forget, I want to know your own story on how you learned how to code. Also share this video to your developer friends. Thanks guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Peace.